Welcome back to Solitude Origins podcast. I want to thank you for coming. And again, we have Steve Moseley, John Perez. And today we're going to talk about the questions that you guys get asked. What do you get asked most often?
Well, I mean, we get asked a lot of stuff, obviously, but I think a lot of the questions that we get over the years are some of the same questions that a lot of bands get asked when they're being interviewed or they're talking to friends and fans alike. I'd say one of the premier questions we get asked all the time is, what are your inspirations, or who are your influences, is what people will most likely come out and say. What are the influences you have, and what are your inspirations? So that's a question I could go on for an hour here, because I love music, and so it's a very deep question for me, because there's a lot of things that influence me as a songwriter, as a musician, and as a music fan and listener. There's so many things that influence me, musically speaking, as well as non-musical things that actually influence me. I think it'd probably be good to start with Steve on this, though, too, because Steve is the same way, man. He is just he's made out of musical notes. His body is comprised of musical notes compounded together really tight, and it looks human. It's amazing how that works.
Is that what that is?
Yeah. Look at that musical note, man. But Steve, Steve and I have similar interests in music, which is one of the bonds that allowed us to create music together and write music together and be in a band together. But I could speak for myself for sure, and like I said, I could go on for forever on this. But I'll talk about maybe me here in just a second. But I'm kind of curious, Steve. Because we've talked about it, but like, what made you decide to? More specifically, what made you decide that you wanted to play heavier metal music and stuff that just had a little heavier vibe to it? Outside of the norm of what was going on in the 80s and 90s, you were interested in heavier music. What's your deal, man? What's going on?
Man, it's funny you asked that, man. It really is deep. It's a long-winded answer, man. And I'll try to sum it up.
Well, please don't make it long-winded. Save
Yeah.
that for me. So thank you.
Well,
we only have so much time.
Yeah, you had mentioned, need an hour to describe that, man. I'm what we call equally as lengthy in that, man, describing all that. It's funny, like I said, that you asked that. You two guys are probably the two biggest influences, either directly or indirectly.
This is news to me, and I know it's news to Kurt.
Believe it or not, and here's one of the things. When Candlemass put the Nightfall album out, that was what, 87?
That's a pretty good record.
Right, pretty good record.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Anyway.
But when they put that out, that record out, Kurt Joye had brought the record, that was 87.
Yeah.
And had brought the record to a party at friends of ours' house, and jammed it, and I was like, man, that's the shit. That was the next evolutionary step of heavier doom type stuff that, in my opinion, hadn't been done in that way, before.
Right.
Really pioneered a sound, and it stuck with me, just like the song on side 2, for those of you that have vinyl, Bewitched. I was bewitched.
Who doesn't?
I was bewitched by it. And I was like,
shout out to Candlemass.
Yeah, shout out to Candlemass.
Absolutely.
So
We love the Candlemass. I
immediately went to the record store where John worked, and because Kurt had said, that's where I got it, was up there at I think it's Pipe Dream or something.
Pipe Dream record.
So I went up there, and John's like, oh yeah, we don't have that stock. I have to order it. What do you mean? I'm bewitched. I can't just.
I'm bewitched.
I
have to have it.
I can't go weeks without. I'm bewitched. It's like ringing in my head. You are bewitched. I was like, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna have this in my head until literally. And I just remember thinking that I don't think I can wait that long. And I think you had said it would take a couple weeks, to get the album. And it did. It took like a week and a half to get it. And that whole time, that's all I could hear. So that's a short little story about being influential, both of you guys, and like in a bunch of other ways. I could go on and on and on. But getting back to the origins of what got me into heavy stuff, man, there was so many things, growing up that for me I thought was heavy without having a heavy production, if that makes sense. So heavy riffs are one thing, heavy lyrical content, that's another thing, and then heavy production, that's a completely separate entity in my opinion. You can have extremely heavy compositions musically but not the best production in terms of heaviness. So yeah, it goes both ways. For me, listening to everything from Boston and Karen Carpenter and Kiss and whatever else, growing up as a kid, none of that stuff was really heavy in the sense of production or
content.
Content, tonality and the modes and
except for Black Sabbath, of course.
Yeah. So there. Okay. Here's another good example. So many years ago, I hadn't been in the band in Solitude that long. John Perez called me up. He said, "Hey, Steve." I said, "Yeah, man, what's going on?" He said, "I just need to know what your top 3 favorite bands are." I was like, John, and coming from him, it's like, oh man, it's like a trick question. Is this like, is somebody gonna jump out and scare me or something if I answer wrong?
If I answer wrong, and only John knows the right answers, right?
You just never know with John.
Right.
So I was like, Black Sabbath, Candlemass, and he goes, "I got to stop right there. Leif Edling's at the house. You can come on over if you like."
I don't remember that, dude. No,
Yeah,
you kidding me?
So,
hey, Leif.
So,
Really?
anyway.
No kidding? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Did you come over?
I did. Yeah,
Oh,
we
wow,
hung out with
okay.
Leif.
That's
Yeah,
great.
He
Okay.
he was in town visiting.
Yeah,
and
Leif
stuff.
was. I remember him
Yeah.
coming in. He was in town for work,
So,
and he came over.
we were hanging
okay,
out. But yeah, I just remember that question. It was like, oh, I'm gonna get it wrong.
Well, so let me expand upon that too, because I think it's really important to know the origins, Solitude Origins, and what drove me to start the band and then continue on. And I was so fortunate over the years to get guys like Steve to assist me and let me and allow me to be able to take the original vision and make it even bigger and better with talented guys that enabled me to do that. I mean, I've always said that, the genesis of the idea for the band starts with me. I got it, and I steered the ship. But without guys like Moseley and all the other guys that were involved in Solitude from beginning to end, it wouldn't have become the juggernaut that it was and created the great music and the input that I had from the other guys. But having said that, it was very important for me to maintain a few things with Solitude over the years. And one of them has to do with influences and inspirations. I was very big on the idea that with Solitude, this should be different. We should create absolutely, it should be heavy metal. Absolutely. At the core of it all, it's always metal. But heavy metal to me, I grew up in the 70s and the early 80s, and heavy metal to me encompasses a lot of different styles all under one umbrella. So heavy metal can be soft, loud, beautiful, pretty, sweet, evil, whatever. It can be everything. So my idea to create Solitude was to create a band that would throw all these influences into one bucket. And all these influences being, if you're talking musical influences from bands, I mean everything from Metal Church and Slayer to Candlemass, Sabbath, all the usual Doom suspects, Fate's Warning, of course, all Running Wild to a degree, even just metal, okay? So the idea was just to create a melting pot of metal styles and keep it really heavy and doomy like Sabbath did for the most part. And so that was the idea, and that was the idea throughout. Stay diverse, be open-minded, don't be one-dimensional in your thinking, don't and never hold yourself to other people's standards of what they expect out of you. So if somebody says, "Well, I thought you were a doom band. What are you doing playing a fast song?" My answer to that is you. Mm-hmm. Depending on how you worded it. It could be a much more nicer answer, but if you try to cast your weight over the idea of what we're doing is not right because it doesn't fit into a mode of what doom metal should be, or this should be or that should be. I don't care about that. It's the idea is just to create great music that stands the test of time. And in my head, this is metal music. And luckily for me, the other guys that have worked with me through the years, that's in their head too. So that's super important to know that the influences musically for Solitude were very diverse and very broad. And it could include tons of non-metal things. And by that, it's the influences, just what drives you, emotionally and spiritually, and what can move a song along. It doesn't. It can come from a variety of sources and influences. And having said that, then too, and I don't think people really took me literally on this over the years because I've said this before, but I was definitely influenced by things outside of music, and so that would just be like thoughts within your own head. Getting a little bit more abstract about it. Rainy, cloudy days, they influence me. Cool weather influences me. Nature influences me. The woods influence me. The idea of death influences me. The idea of God influences me. The idea of a psychedelic realm into the outer cosmos influences me. So all these things had an impact on my head and determined how I'd write music and how I would present it with my limited abilities, So the idea was just to be creative and get as much of it out there as possible. So luckily we're armed with people like Steve, Edgar, Robert, Covington, Lyle, Brad, Chris, all these guys throughout the years that brought their own influences, tastes, and their own things. I'm sure guys like Moseley were influenced by things outside of music as well too.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, John. And that's maybe a short little lesson or influence for those that are being under the influence or influenced in general.
Psychedelics?
No, what I was going to say really, but I mean, there's probably
we'll talk about that at another later date.
That's another episode, yeah. So, but the youth that may think that it's required to have a long list of really heavy bands that influence you in order to write music for a really heavy band.
Yeah.
I wasn't really influenced by any really heavy bands. Growing up, I had Blue Oyster Cult and of course Black Sabbath was, Black Sabbath, that's different. But I mean, there was Boston, there was, all kinds of stuff, man. Everything from Kiss and Ted Nugent and the Carpenters, man. I enjoyed, all kind of variety of different music, man. But guitar playing, the same kind of thing. You don't have to be influenced by this. You don't have to be influenced by music at all. For me, it was science fiction. I really thought science fiction was an escape, and I wanted music to take me the same place that some of the science fiction books and movies that I had been privy to also get. I wanted to have that same experience with music. Fantasy,
Yeah.
thing. So for me, it was different. Science fiction, fantasy, nature was a big influence as well.
They used to make jokes, and you'd see in the press about these black metal musicians, that play black metal, and they're trying to be as grim as possible. And believe me, I know a lot about black metal. Kind of followed it pretty closely for a long, long time. But anyway, there used to be stories about. They'd make fun of, he'd go out into the woods by himself and just, absorb himself in the gloom of the northern woods up in Norway. He's just, it may be kind of funny, but I kind of used to do that. We used to have you guys would know, we had a place called River Legacy Park now, and it was where my parents lived, where I was living at the time. And it was before it was a park. It was just a wooded area, and there was some trails that some of the kids had done over the years, but it was just a wooded area. And I literally would get my Walkman at the time and ride my bike or the car down there and just go out into the woods sometimes and just kind of sit there on a nice overcast day and listen to some Dead Can Dance or some really trippy kind of otherworldly music. And just become inspired by the feelings that I was feeling and the thoughts I was having and the visions I would have about things in general, life and stuff. And that would inspire me to want to create, heavy sounds, heavy being something that just moves you. And heavy comes in very different forms, So, it's kind of silly to think about it. You just go into the woods trying to be all grim, listen to music, But, I wasn't trying to make a point. I was just doing it because I was doing it. I was into that. I love music, and I love listening to music on headphones by myself out on a cool, cloudy day. And it would inspire me, man, to just get heavy, And so anyway, that's a little secret there that I don't know how many people would tell you these things that you're inspired by things outside of music. It's just too easy to say, well, I'm inspired by Black Sabbath, Trouble, and Judas Priest and Candlemass, and that's what we are. But it's so much more than that, and it always should be for a band. I think you should always reach beyond your influences. When you first start playing, you learn from people that the music that you like. When we first got together, of course, we learned songs by Candlemass, Trouble. We learned some Sabbath songs, just to get the motor running and to get the wheels turning. But then after a while, I didn't want to ever sound like Candlemass. I just wanted to get that same idea across: super heavy, super melodic, classy, epic, huge. So it's not about trying to sound like your idols or trying to sound like the people that you're influenced by. It's literally taking that word at face value and being influenced by that, and then you throw your own spin on that, and that's super important as a musician and as a performer, as an artist. You've always got to throw your own little spin on that. It's okay to be influenced by other people, but you've got to throw your own spin so you become your own unique entity. And I'm so incredibly proud of the fact that Solitude did that, and that's one of the things I'm most proud about Solitude is that Nobody sounds like Solitude, and we don't sound like anybody else. We had our own thing going, and so very much pleases me that we were like that. But anyway, that's a long-winded little take on influences and inspirations, I think.
And there you have it.
Thank you for visiting us at Solitude Origins.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Yeah, don't forget to subscribe.
That's right.
Make
John.
sure you follow us.
Make sure you
follow us on Facebook.
And like.
Follow us.
Like us.
Like
I hope
us.
you like us.
And
Do you
love
like
us.
us? Yeah, love us. Put a couple hearts there.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks
See you
for
next
joining
time.
us.
Radio.